Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My dad worked construction, my mom was a nurse, and I was just trying to get through my last year of high school without too much trouble. We had a decent house with a backyard where dad liked to tinker around and things were generally peaceful. That was until our neighbor decided that everything we did was her personal problem. Karen had lived next door for about 2 years by this point. She was that person who always found something to complain about. Too many cars parked on the street during my birthday party. Our grass was too long one week, another time it was too short and we were ruining the neighborhood aesthetic. You get the idea. Most of the time we just ignored her and tried to keep the peace, but that was about to become impossible. Our old fence had been falling apart for months. It was this ancient wooden thing that was probably there when the house was built 20 years ago. Posts were rotting, boards were loose, and one good storm would have knocked the whole thing down. Dad finally decided it was time to replace it. He spent weeks planning it out, measuring everything twice, making sure it would be perfect. That should have been the end of it, but of course Karen had other ideas. It was a warm evening in early spring when we were all in the backyard looking at where the new fence would go. Dad had his tape measure out and was showing us how he planned to line everything up exactly with the property markers. That was when we heard her voice cutting through the peaceful evening air. Karen shouted at my dad, telling him that the fence better not cross into her property. My dad barely looked up from his measurements. He told her not to worry because he had measured everything and it was all on our side. Karen warned him that she would be watching. She turned and walked back into her house, slamming the door loud enough that I am pretty sure the whole street heard it. I looked at my parents and we all just kinda shrugged. This was typical Karen behavior. We figured once the fence was up and she saw it was exactly where it was supposed to be, that would be it. Dad spent the next few weeks working on that fence. He had some buddies from work come help, and they did a really professional job. It looked great, way better than the old falling apart thing we had before. For about 2 days, everything was quiet. Then the complaints started again. I was in my room one afternoon, probably avoiding homework by playing video games, when I heard shouting from outside. I looked out my window and saw Karen standing in our backyard, right up in my dad's face. He had been doing some touch-up painting on the fence posts. Karen yelled that the fence was 2 inches onto her property and that she knew her rights. Dad told her they had been over this and that he followed the property line exactly. My mom must have heard the commotion too because she came outside right then. She suggested to Karen that maybe she was mistaken and that we could have someone check if she wanted. Karen shouted back that she did not need anyone to tell her where her property was. She told my dad to mark her words, that he would regret this. She stormed off again, and my parents just looked at each other with these tired expressions. I came downstairs and found them sitting at the kitchen table. Dad looked frustrated in a way I had never really seen before. The next few weeks were tense. I would catch Karen just standing at her window, staring at our fence with this weird, intense look. Sometimes she would be outside with a tape measure, checking the distance between the fence and her house. It was getting creepy, but we were all hoping she would just get over it eventually. Then came the incident that really set things off. I was helping Dad plant some flowers one Saturday morning. We were trying to make the front yard look nice since spring had arrived. The weather was perfect, and it should have been a relaxing morning. That was when we overheard Karen talking to our neighbor from across the street. They were standing on the sidewalk and Karen was not exactly keeping her voice down. Karen was complaining about how we put up the fence without even consulting her and asking what was with our eyesore garden. Dad just rolled his eyes and muttered something about ignoring her. He went back to digging holes for the flowers, but then Karen said something that made him stop. Karen complained that it was not just the fence but that their good-for-nothing son was always playing his music so loud and being disruptive. I felt my face get hot. I mean, yeah, sometimes I played music in my room, but I always kept it at a reasonable volume. I had headphones for when it got late. This was just her making stuff up to complain about. Dad stood up, brushed the dirt off his hands, and walked over to where they were standing. He said he could not help but overhear. Karen's whole tone changed, suddenly all sweet and innocent. She said they were just chatting about neighborhood stuff. Dad asked her why she did not talk to us directly, if she had issues with our fence or my music. Karen said she was just making conversation, but since he was there, the fence was still a problem for her. Dad told her the fence was fine and that I would keep my music down. He asked me if that was right. I nodded from where I was standing by the flower beds and said, "Sure, no problem." Karen just gave this little shrug and walked away, but I could tell this was not over, not by a long shot. Things seemed to calm down for a little while after that. I made sure to keep my music extra quiet, even though I knew that was not really what this was about. Karen just did not like us, plain and simple. Or maybe she did not like anyone. Hard to tell. Then came the community meeting. Our neighborhood had these every few months to discuss boring stuff like street maintenance and upcoming block parties. This one was at our neighbor's house across the street, the same one Karen had been complaining to. He had a big living room that could fit most of the street. I was not even sure why I went. Probably just had nothing better to do that Tuesday night. I stood at the back of the room trying to be invisible while adults talked about whatever adults talk about at these things. The room was packed, everyone chatting and catching up. Then Karen walked in and you could literally feel the energy change. People got quieter, looked at each other. Everyone knew about the fence situation by now. Our neighbor who was hosting tried to get things started. He said they should get started and that they were there to discuss some neighborhood issues. He did not even get to finish his sentence. Karen announced that she wanted to talk about our new fence. She pointed right at my dad. I felt my stomach drop. Here we go. Dad stood up, staying calm like he always tried to do. He said they had been over this and that the fence was on our property. Karen pointed her finger at my dad like she was accusing him of murder or something. She said it was not just that, but that it was a symbol of how the neighborhood was going downhill. She told everyone not to forget about the loud music. Our neighbor tried to regain control of the meeting. He asked everyone to keep it civil and said they were there to find solutions, not argue. But Karen was on a roll. She started going off about everything. The fence, my music, someone else's cat, the way another neighbor parked their car. It was like she had been keeping a list of every tiny thing that annoyed her and decided to unload it all at once. People started arguing back, defending themselves, and suddenly the whole room erupted into chaos. Mom was trying to calm people down. Dad was defending our family. I just wanted to disappear into the floor. What was I even doing there? I should have stayed home. I kind of zoned out for a minute, overwhelmed by all the shouting when suddenly Karen's voice cut through everything. She yelled that everything she was saying was valid and that the neighborhood needed to change, starting with us. That was when Dad said something that genuinely shocked me. He was always the calm one, always trying to keep the peace and make everyone happy. But he looked Karen straight in the eyes with this completely serious expression. He told her it was not the neighborhood that needed to change, but her attitude. The room went dead silent. Then she let out this frustrated scream, turned around, and stormed out of the house. The door slam was so loud I am surprised it did not break. After she left, the meeting basically fell apart. People were whispering to each other, shaking their heads. Our neighbor tried to wrap things up, but nobody was really paying attention anymore. We all just kind of shuffled out and went home. On the walk back to our house, Dad was quiet. He looked worried, which made me worried. Mom reached over and squeezed his hand but did not say anything. A few nights later, everything exploded. Literally. I was up late in my room gaming with my headphones on. It was probably around midnight. My window was open because it was a warm night and our air conditioning was broken. I started to smell something weird. At first I thought maybe someone was having a really late barbecue, but the smell kept getting stronger and it definitely was not food. I pulled off my headphones and the smell hit me full force. Something was burning. I ran to my window and looked out into the backyard. Orange flames were climbing up the side of our new fence, lighting up the whole yard. For a second I just froze, my brain not processing what I was seeing. Then reality kicked in. I started yelling that there was a fire. I was running down the stairs before I even finished yelling. My parents were already up, probably smelled the smoke. We all rushed outside into the backyard. The fence was engulfed in flames, the wood crackling and popping. And standing there, right in the middle of our yard, was Karen. She was holding a red gas can in her hands. Dad asked her what she had done. Karen's eyes were wild, reflecting the flames. She looked completely unhinged. She yelled back that our fence was on her property. While Dad and Karen started screaming at each other, I grabbed the garden hose and ran toward the fence. I started spraying water on it, trying to keep the fire from spreading to our house or the trees nearby. Neighbors started coming outside, drawn by the smoke and the shouting. Our neighbor from across the street was standing on his lawn, in his pajamas, his mouth hanging open. He asked what in the world was happening. Karen just stood there watching the fence burn like she was in some kind of trance. The look on her face was satisfied, almost happy. It made my skin crawl. Then came the sound that made everything 10 times worse. A loud bang echoed through the yard. I hit the ground, the hose spraying water everywhere. My first thought was that something in the fire had exploded. But when I looked up, I saw my mom standing on the back porch. She was holding my dad's old shotgun, the one he kept locked in the safe in their bedroom. She looked terrified, but also fierce, like a mama bear protecting her cubs. Mom shouted at Karen to stay away from her family. The gun was pointed at Karen. It was dark and Mom was shaking, and the shot had gone way wide, hitting nothing but air. But Karen screamed and dropped to the ground anyway, covering her head with her arms. Dad jumped up and ran to Mom. He told her to put the gun down and that it was okay. Karen was on the ground, but she started screaming. She said we thought we could just shoot at her and get away with it. Dad told her that no one was trying to shoot her and that it was a warning shot. Karen yelled that she would sue us for everything we had. Dad reminded her that she set our property on fire. Karen got up from the ground, dirt and grass stuck to her clothes. Then she just charged at my dad like she was going to tackle him or hit him. That was when Mom dropped the gun on the porch and ran down the steps. Before anyone could react, she punched Karen right in the face. It was a solid hit, the kind you hear in movies. Karen's head snapped to the side. Mom said again to stay away from her family. I made a mental note right then and there to never, ever get on my mom's bad side. I had no idea she could throw a punch like that. Karen recovered faster than I expected. She grabbed Mom and they both went down, rolling around on the grass. Dad and Karen's husband, who had finally come outside, were trying to pull them apart. Other neighbors rushed over to help. It was absolute chaos. Fire, screaming, fighting. Sirens started wailing in the distance, getting closer. Someone must have called 911. Within minutes, our street was lit up with red and blue lights. Police cars, fire trucks, an ambulance, the whole works. The firefighters got to work on the fence immediately. Police officers started separating everyone, asking questions. I watched them handcuff Karen and start walking her toward the police car. She was still yelling, but I could not make out what she was saying anymore. Her husband was following behind, trying to talk to the officers, saying something about how she was not well, how she did not mean it. But the cops were not interested. Mom had a split lip and some scratches. Dad had a bruise forming on his arm. The paramedics checked us all over. I was fine, just shaken up. The fence was a total loss, burned down to charred posts, but our house was okay. That was what mattered. After the police took Karen away and the firefighters left, the neighbors slowly went back to their houses. It was almost 3 in the morning by then. We went inside, locked all the doors, and just sat in the living room for a while. Nobody knew what to say. What do you say after something like that? Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Everyone had opinions about what happened. Some people felt sorry for Karen, said she must have had mental problems. Most people thought she got what she deserved. We heard she was going to trial. One evening at dinner, Dad brought it up. He mentioned that her trial was next week. I pushed food around my plate, not really hungry. I asked him if he thought she would get jail time. Dad said that setting fire to private property was serious, and so was assault. Mom just nodded, touching the fading bruise on her lip. Dad went to the trial. Mom and I stayed home. I could not focus on anything all day. Just kept checking the clock, wondering what was happening. When Dad finally came home in the afternoon, we gathered in the living room. Mom asked what happened. Dad took a breath and told us that Karen pleaded guilty. He said she received 5 years in prison among other things. 5 years. I tried to wrap my head around that. 5 years of her life gone because she could not let go of a fence that was not even on her property. A few days later, I was outside when our neighbor from across the street walked by with her cat. She mentioned she heard about the sentencing and asked if I thought it seemed fair. I told her yeah, I guessed so, and that I just hoped Karen learned something from it. The neighbor said she hoped so too. Dad started building a new fence the following month. This time he had a surveyor come out first and mark everything officially. He took pictures, got documentation, made sure everything was perfect. Not that it mattered anymore with Karen gone, but I think he just wanted to do it right. The neighborhood felt different after everything that happened. Quieter somehow, but also closer. People checked in on us more. There were fewer complaints about little things. Maybe everyone realized life was too short to fight over stupid stuff. Or maybe they were just afraid of ending up like Karen. The new fence looks great, by the way. Sturdy and exactly where it should be. I've been at this women's clothing store for over 20 years, starting back in my 50s. On good days, I could double or even triple my hourly rate. The store catered to older women, and over the years, I built up a loyal customer base. They'd come in asking for me specifically, and I always made sure they left happy. For 10 years straight, I was the top seller in our district, even working part-time. My manager hated me for it. She was everything you'd picture when you hear the word Karen. Short hair, carried extra weight, and had this entitled attitude that made everyone around her miserable. She cheated on her husband openly, talked about her boyfriends during work hours, and backstabbed anyone who wasn't part of her little clique. The assistant manager was basically her shadow, following her around and agreeing with everything she said. They ran the store like it was high school, complete with gossip sessions and petty drama. Karen would comment on how I acted like I was special every time I made a sale, and the assistant manager would agree, saying I acted like I was better than everyone else. I heard things like this all the time, but I kept my head down and focused on professionalism. My sales numbers spoke for themselves. Karen got back at me by giving me the worst shifts, times when barely any customers came through the door. My regular clients would show up during my hours anyway, and I'd still outsell everyone else quarter after quarter. Then the virus hit everything in early 2020. The company cut all commissions, which was a huge blow. That commission was the main reason I put up with Karen and her nonsense for so long. Without it, I was making barely above minimum wage. The store also had to reduce hours for everyone. While other employees got 8 to 10 hours weekly, I was lucky if Karen scheduled me for 6. She used the situation to push me out, and the district manager let her do it because they were friends. The store put in a mandatory mask policy for staff and customers. Karen and her group complained constantly about how the whole thing was a hoax and how wearing masks just made us look like sheep following the government. The assistant manager would chime in that people were overreacting to what was just the flu. Several times Karen let customers enter without masks, despite state and company mandates. When this happened, I'd go to the back room and stay away from those people. I wasn't going to argue with her, but I also wasn't going to risk my health. Then my friend passed away from complications related to the virus. The funeral was scheduled during one of my shifts, so I called out. Karen and her assistant attacked me for it the next time I came in. Karen said my friend probably just had the flu or was in bad health, and that I was feeding into this lie about how dangerous it was. I said my friend had died and asked her to show some respect. Karen dismissed me, saying I was just being dramatic. Over the following months, several of our regular customers also died from the virus. These were women who'd been coming to our store for years, people we all knew personally. Karen and her group kept up their narrative. The assistant manager would say that each death must have been from bad life choices, and Karen would agree, insisting it definitely wasn't from this so-called pandemic and that people just wanted attention. Every time I attended a funeral or supported the deceased's family, I'd hear snide remarks about supporting a hoax. I couldn't believe how heartless these people were. These customers had been loyal to our store for years, and Karen couldn't even show basic sympathy. When restrictions started lifting, the company mandated that all employees get vaccinated or provide a doctor's note explaining why they couldn't. Most of our staff submitted their paperwork, but not Karen or her assistant. Karen said she wasn't pumping poison into her veins, claiming that's what the vaccine was. I said it was mandated by the company and she'd have to get it eventually or provide a medical exemption. Karen snapped back that she'd figure something out and to mind my own business. I tried talking to her multiple times because I genuinely worried about her safety and her family's safety. I said I just wanted her and her family to be safe and asked her to please get the vaccine. Karen said not to tell her what to do and that I wasn't her mother. A few days later, she texted me saying she'd gotten the vaccine. I replied that I was happy for her and glad she was safe. Her response was a gif of someone throwing up the middle finger. I should have known right then that something was off. During my next shift, I overheard Karen and her assistant talking in the break room. Karen asked if her assistant could believe how stupid I was, saying I actually thought she got the vaccine. The assistant manager called me a moron and a sheep, adding that they would never fall for that propaganda. They laughed about fooling me. I realized then that they'd forged their vaccination documents. Later that same shift, I was helping a customer in the back section when some woman came into the store and stole clothing worth about $100. The assistant manager was the only other employee there, and according to company policy, there should always be 2 people working. Video footage showed her in the front playing on her phone when the theft happened. Company policy was clear about theft situations. We weren't supposed to confront thieves. Instead, we should call security after they left to avoid lawsuits and protect employee safety. That evening, Karen called me. She said I was on probation pending an investigation for allowing that woman to steal from the store. I said that didn't make sense since I followed company policy exactly. Karen said we'd see what the investigation found. The probation eventually led to my dismissal. The official reasoning they gave was vague and didn't hold up to scrutiny. I realized they'd been looking for any excuse to fire me. Years ago, I'd asked my kid to teach me how to record audio on my phone. I lived in a single consent state, meaning I could legally record conversations without telling the other person. Over the years, I'd collected quite a library of recordings. Karen and her group backstabbing people, gossiping about scandalous things, discussing Karen's affairs. I kept everything because you never know when you need to protect yourself. I'd gone to human resources multiple times over the years with my recordings, but nothing ever came of it. The department worked directly under the district manager, who was in Karen's pocket. I kept paperwork and proof of every visit, including some recordings of those meetings. I also recorded the phone call where they fired me. My regular customers were upset when they learned about my dismissal. One client ran a column at a major newspaper in the nearby city. Since I was part-time, I didn't have much legal standing for a wrongful dismissal claim, but that didn't mean I had no options. I compiled the best recordings from my collection and had my kid email them to the corporate offices. We sent them to the chief executive officer, chief technology officer, and every board member we could find. Along with the recordings, I wrote about how Karen, her assistant, and their group refused to get vaccinated and forged their documents to pass company standards. My newspaper columnist client put me in touch with another journalist. They received copies of the recordings, text messages, and the dismissal phone call. They interviewed me for an article and a television slot on the local news. I discussed everything: the commission cuts, clear favoritism, lack of intervention from human resources, forged documents, company policy violations, the theft incident. Some recordings included conversations about Karen's various boyfriends over the years despite being married. I wrote an anonymous email to her husband that included those recordings. Things exploded fast. Karen, her assistant, the district manager, and several of their group were immediately fired and put under investigation for forging documents. While forging a vaccination card might not seem serious, those white cards contain the government seal. Forging government seals is a federal crime. The Federal Bureau of Investigation got involved after one recording featured Karen admitting to using forged cards. After the article and television segment ran, the chief executive officer reached out to me personally. She apologized for the behavior of human resources, the district manager, Karen, and the assistant manager. She offered me a raise, but I declined. I'd already found a job that paid fairly, and let me work on my own schedule. The real problem for the company was the public relations nightmare. Their employees were breaking company policy at a store that exclusively served older women regarding a virus that predominantly killed older people. Karen's husband separated from her after discovering her infidelity through the recordings. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.